Good morning, everyone. Happy Halloween and welcome to FPC Radio Live. It's Monday, October the 31st. And yes, folks, if you're wondering, I am dressed in a costume. I've gone as a ghost. Can't tell by the translucent color of my skin right now. The light is not really doing me any favors. And clearly, I have to get out and get a little bit more sun these days, John, because I've just kind of become a shut-in, so to speak. And I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I definitely need to get some more sun, and I'm noticing that every time I get on camera here.
You've got to get more sunny, and it's not like you live in a place that doesn't have an abundance of sun. It's not like you're up here in the Northeast where we hit to see the sun like every third day.
Yeah. No, it is constantly sunny down here. It's always sunny, actually. Also, not only down here, but in Philadelphia as well, as the Eagles moved to 7-0. Yeah, you like how we did that?
Nice.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's the part of the year now where it's like, all right, the summer, summers down here are exhausting because, it's always hot, constantly hot. So it's kind of nice to get a little bit of a reprieve. And, if you get a little bit cooler temperature down here, it makes you feel a little bit better about staying inside and, watching horror movies all day, when I have nothing better to do. I mean, it is Halloween, so it's very, very appropriate. So I know you're not a big horror guy, horror film buff. I know you're more of the mob movies and some of the
Well, I like drama is my favorite, obviously. Yeah. I would say also, as far as I like mystery and suspense rather than horror. Like, I love Hitchcock, but yeah, I mean, those aren't really horror movies. And some of his most famous movies I don't think are all that great, like The Birds. I don't think it's a great movie, but everyone's seen that. Psycho is excellent, but Rear Window, Vertigo, all those, but those aren't horror movies, obviously. Yeah, I'm not a big horror movie fan.
Would you have you seen, and I'm only talking about, say, the first couple, the Saw movies, and that you could consider that some, more so drama suspense than actual horror, although it has some horror elements to it, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. No, those were good. I mean, I'll see them, but yeah, those were well done because it's there's some build up to it. There's some imagination to it, and it weighs on your mind before it finally pays off. But yeah, so those are all pretty good. I mean, the Halloween movies are good. Friday the 13th. I mean, how many have there been? I mean, again, when they came out, I was so young that it was just a night out. It was entertainment. So but I kind of wasn't a big fan of them. But you see them.
Yeah, look, I'm more partial to some of the older horror movies as well, just because I feel like they rely less on the shock and awe factor, i.e. just over the top gore, which I think cheapens the movie itself. Because look, we're kind of desensitized to that. I mean, we that stuff in, sad to say, everyday news, let alone in a horror film. But so I do tend to I guess lean towards some of the older films where it's obviously the technology wasn't necessarily there to shock and awe you. At the time it did, all the bubble gum melting and face falling off, all that stuff, everyone was, it's great. Now it's, all computerized and looks as real as it can possibly get. But yeah, going back to the Saw franchise, and Joel says it was amazing. I agree. I very much enjoyed it. There's nothing like the reveal on the first one, with, kind of mystery. And that's the intrigue of it. That's what I like, the makes you think and kind of has a little twists and turns and all that other stuff. So I also like the see, I'm kind of nuts. I'll watch, like, say, Final Destination. And that's another one you can maybe say isn't necessarily your classic horror film. Sort of a mystery and suspense, but it does have that, like, supernatural element and death and all that stuff to it. So I guess it would fall under that category. But I'm the type of person who'll watch that before I, like, go on a plane ride. You know what I mean? I'm like that. I'm sick. I'm sadistic like that, that somehow makes me feel more comfortable. I'm like, well, if it happens in the movies, it surely cannot happen to me. So, but I do, John, every single time I sit in my seat, assuming I'm not sitting in the front row and I don't have the tray table in front of me, I check the tray table just to make sure that it's not loose. Because if it was loose, maybe I might think twice about flying on that plane.
Yeah, I mean, if you've seen airplane disaster films, I think the best one is Fearless.
Yeah.
Starring Bridges. I thought that was incredible. I thought he was incredible in it. So I don't know if you want to see that before a flight. But I really don't have a fear of flying, so I'm fine with all that stuff. I'm probably right there with you. I'm not going to go into that situation and need to do all sorts of happy things. But yeah, that's a great airplane disaster film as well, because it weighs so much on your mind and how much he changes as a character. But yeah, there's that genre. Like, I know over the weekend I'm seeing on Twitter that people are trying to throw Jaws into a horror movie, and I'm like, that's an action adventure, suspense. That's got everything. It's got a bit of comedy in it too. I mean, that's just a phenomenal film anyway. I mean, to me, the really, really, really great films don't fit into a genre. They kind of fit into many of them.
Well, I mean, you got to figure too, like a classic horror film has to have one very crucial element to it, and it's not the horror, it's not the gore, it's the clueless group of teenagers / young adults. I mean, because think about it. I mean, every single film of that genre. I mean, I think that's the most distinguishing mark, because we're sitting here talking, well, what about Saw? What about this? What about that? And they kind of fit into that, that ballpark, with very few exceptions. But for the most part, they all kind of follow the same script. It's a bunch of clueless, teenagers / young adults going off somewhere, and there's something that happens, and all of a sudden, horror ensues, and generally you get to watch the worst instincts imaginable with these people, and that's always a joy. But no, I love it, and I today it's just going to be kind of just throw the horror movies on and wait until Monday Night Football, where we could potentially get another horror film from the Browns tonight. Not so much the Bengals. I think the Bengals are starting to kind of find their way a little bit, but I don't know if yesterday we had a lot of bad football necessarily, save for maybe that Jets-Patriots game at moments. But it wasn't necessarily great football. You know what I mean? Like, I think we had a lot of games where it kind of one-sided, and we'll talk in detail about that Sunday Night Football game, because it was far closer than what it was. I mean, I don't really care. I know Chiefs fans were rejoicing at the end of the game about Josh Allen throwing interceptions, but quite frankly, I just don't care at the end of that game. I mean, to me, they just got bored. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, they had control of that game, and by the end of it, and we've seen it with the Patriots for many years, where it's just like, all right, how much toying can we do with this team right now? And that's the impression I got watching last night, because I texted you as before Buffalo even scored their first touchdown. I thought as soon as the Packers failed in that opening drive, the game was over, because they started to move the ball, and then it just absolutely stalled, and that was it. And then you saw Buffalo just run, a team that doesn't, outside of Josh Allen, doesn't necessarily run the ball all that well. I'm not saying they're a bad running team, but one, they don't necessarily need to, but two, they're this isn't Derrick Henry, okay? And on a side note, John, you're welcome, Derrick Henry, because the moment I said and questioned whether or not you were done, he was clearly is not done. So I was very, very wrong about that, but we'll get to that in a minute. No, I thought, again, right off the bat, first quarter, that exchange where the Packers just kind of failed with the ball, and then the Bills went right down the field. I was like, yeah, this game's over. It's just, I don't know. It's not like I didn't think. I mean, I picked the Bills to win this game, John, so I'm not sitting there. I picked them. I don't know if I did it on Friday when we did our picks, but I know yesterday I picked them to cover the spread, which was 10.5 going into the game, something like that.
Yeah. 10.5, 11. Yeah. I actually had the Packers plus the points, which was the backdoor cover. And I thought Buffalo would win. They're just, I think, the best team in football, along with Philadelphia and Kansas City, and Green Bay's a mess right now, really on both sides of the ball. So I'm not surprised that Buffalo won that game. But I think you're right. Buffalo built up a lead. It was 24-7 at halftime, and you could just tell they were the better team. And I almost got the impression in the second half that Matt LaFleur, and maybe to a lesser degree Aaron Rodgers, although I give Rodgers credit. I mean, sometimes he'll check out of those games. He didn't check out last night. He hung in there, and he played and tried to be as best behaved as he could. He wasn't necessarily rolling his eyes all that often, and he seemed to be involved with his team. But it almost felt like they were more interested in covering the spread than winning the game, because they just kept running the ball and then huddling up and then the play clock would get down to 5, which it always does at them. I'm like, are they aware they're down 17 points? And Buffalo, which they only scored 3 points in the second half, the Bills, but they're quite capable of putting up 3-4 touchdowns in a half. I'm like, are they trying to win the game or are they trying to cover the point spread? And look, I had a horrible day against the spread. I was 4-8 yesterday, my worst Sunday of the year by far, but that was one I snuck in on the backdoor cover.
Well, and let me ask you, do you think it's more just coaching decision or maybe just, I mean, how good are they throwing the ball, John? You know what I mean? Like,
not good.
Like,
no.
Like and I'm trying to give, Aaron Rodgers the benefit of the doubt, and he certainly deserved it. And like, I know people are like, oh, wait, what are you talking about? Deserved it. Well, I've talked about this a lot over the weeks or years or whatever you want to call it. I feel very strongly that Tom Brady has ruined how we can appropriately, discuss quarterbacks. So what should be a celebration of a very great career for Aaron Rodgers has turned into, well, he's only won one Super Bowl and he's failed here, he's failed there. And it's like, that's because you're comparing him to Tom Brady, essentially, not directly, but in the back of everyone's mind, that's the reason why Aaron Rodgers looks like a failure. The reality of it is he's just like, every other great quarterback that's come and gone in this league. It's just, how many quarterbacks have won more than 2 Super Bowls? You know what I mean? It's very rare that you win 2 Super Bowls. Now, people, Eli Manning did this. Well, sometimes circumstances lead to that. So the reality of it is Aaron Rodgers has had a really great career. However, we're going to look at it at the end of the day as it being underwhelming because, well, he didn't live up to Tom Brady's hype. Well, guess what? You're going to find a lot of underwhelming careers when you're comparing it that way. So, so needless to say, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt because, again, it's Aaron Rodgers, and I do think that maybe he's feeling the effects of the age maybe a little bit more. Maybe just I don't know, John. I'm not trying to jump on the it's all Aaron Rodgers, it's all Aaron Rodgers, but it seemed very telling that they continued to force that run, and it seemed to be their best part of their game. And that's the exact opposite, when we discussed Tampa Bay, where it's like, yeah, they'll try to force the run. And actually, surprisingly, Tom Brady leads the league in pass attempts. But again, I think that's it's skewed because of the balance and when and where they do these, pass and run plays. But, from a Tampa Bay perspective, you keep running the ball. You can't run the ball. The Packers can run the ball. So I don't know. I guess that's a long way of me asking the question. Is it more Aaron Rodgers or is it more just coaching?
I think what happened was, and we saw the interview coming out of the half with Matt LaFleur, whose brother, by the way, is Mike LaFleur. He's the offensive coordinator of the Jets. So, family trait is sometimes they do some kind of questionable things as play callers. But
I think he said they were 0-0. So technically they only lost. Well, they technically won that game.
They won the second half.
10-3, right?
Maybe there'll be a new scoring system in the NFL. You get some points for winning the second half or losing the game. I think at that point, he's like, we're losing to a better team, a much better team that's right now, clicking on all cylinders. Let's start at 0-0. Let's try to win the half, and maybe you carry this over. Now they're 3-5. You're playing Detroit next week at Detroit. Detroit at home, they don't win anywhere, but they do score points at home. So that's probably going to be another tough game. And then you could be looking at a 5-game losing streak at that point. You're not making the playoffs off of that. So I think that was kind of the mindset. Okay, let's just try to get out of here without a ton of injuries, which they always have a bunch of injuries for whatever reason. I don't know if they're soft or if the training staff isn't all that good, but it just seems like in the course of a game, guys are just constantly being carted off the field. I'm not sure why, whatever the case is with that, and then move on to the next week. They weren't going to come back in that game. So I think that was the approach. And yeah, they can run the football without question. They got 2 really good running backs. Their offensive line is better at run blocking than pass blocking at this point, right? So, take advantage of that and see what happens. But yeah, it was probably a coaching decision. I also think Rodgers is making business decisions at this point. I don't think he wants to get hit. I don't think Brady wants to get hit. At this point, one guy's 39, about to be 39. The other guy's 45. They've got all the money in the world. One guy's the greatest of all time. The other guy, to me, is a top 5 quarterback of the Super Bowl era. At this point, they're like, I don't want to get hit. Whereas you look at Josh Allen, he's careening into people. He's causing contact. when they score a touchdown, he comes over to the sideline, and that dude, Brandon Phillips, who's a defensive lineman, how big is he? Because he picks up Josh Allen, who's 6'5", 250, like he's a 4-year-old. He like lifts them up off the ground. But that's the kind of mojo that team has now. They're winning, and they've got swag, and they've got attitude, and the quarterback, is again the closest thing I've seen to John Elway. I think he lights up his team with that attitude. But he's also 26 years old. So there's a little bit difference there between a 39-year-old and a 45-year-old who probably after playing all these years don't want to get hit, and we'll have the eye rolls and a little bit of cynicism there compared to a guy like Josh Allen or any of those young quarterbacks.
Well, look, I mean, I don't think anyone as good as Josh Allen is going to expect him to play till 45. Certainly, the way he plays the game. Look, no one. I mean, you can say that about Patrick Mahomes and all this, and this is why it kind of gets a little ridiculous when people are projecting so far in the future, because it's like, oh, all he has to do is play 15 more years. It's like, huh? Like, you realize like how hard that is. Like, it's not easy. And again, this goes back to what I said just a few moments ago. Like, Tom Brady's kind of just completely screwed up how we evaluate quarterbacks now, because they're always going to be compared to him, but it's not appropriate because, well, he's an outlier at this point. Maybe down the road we can sit here and reevaluate years and years from now, but right now he's an outlier. So anyone compared to him is going to fall short. And that's why I think unfairly, I think Aaron Rodgers' career, at least from a, and I don't mean this in an insulting way, because I think the popularity of it is built on casual fans. But the casual fan is going to look at that as a failure. Oh, Aaron Rodgers sucks. He could only go to one Super Bowl. Well, there's a lot of great quarterbacks that only went to one Super Bowl. There's a lot of great quarterbacks that never won a Super Bowl. Obviously,
great quarterbacks that never made a Super Bowl. I mean, Dan Fouts is a guy you look at and you could talk to Clark Judge about Dan Fouts, how good he was.
We talked to Dan Fouts.
You talked to Dan.
We did talk to Dan Fouts.
The hell with talking to Clark to Dan Fouts. I mean, Dan Fouts, who's an all-time great quarterback. I mean, he was as good as anyone in the late 70s, early 80s. Never went to a Super Bowl, but does that make him a loser? No. I mean, it was still a great quarterback. Dan Marino went to one and got blown out 38-16 by the 49ers. I mean, does that make him a horrible quarterback? No. I mean, it's just that to get to the Super Bowl is difficult. I mean, that's why what Brady did and has done is nuts. It doesn't even comprehend. Like, he has 7 Super Bowl wins, so not exactly breaking news. We all know that. The next quarterback with the most wins would be Montana and Terry Bradshaw, each with 4. So the difference from Brady to, let's say, Montana is the same from Montana and every other quarterback that won one Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Like that. So it's kind of like how Tiger Woods was in his prime, where like he was just like lapping the field. You'd look at the numbers and go, this guy is the difference between Tiger Woods and the second best golfer is the same as the difference between the second best golfer and like the 32nd best golfer. That's how wide the gap was. Barry Bonds when he was in his heyday, Wayne Gretzky when he was putting up, over 200 points. He just looked at it and goes, this doesn't make sense. And that's what Brady has done. So that's why when people start to, knock all these other quarterbacks, I'm like, stop comparing anybody to him and let's compare him to other guys. That's why that second Super Bowl would be huge for Rodgers. And look, he had opportunities in 14 and in 20. Those were the 2 years that it was there for him to at least get back to the Super Bowl and I think win. If he could have gotten that second Super Bowl, now he's on par with Manning and Elway with 2 Super Bowl wins. And now he's in that group with those other guys. Well, he's below those guys at this point.
And that's why ultimately Super Bowl wins are very important for quarterbacks specifically because, well, it's a very hard thing to do. People, again, we've been desensitized because of Brady, and who knows what would have happened. And like, who knows what would have happened had he not won 6 with the Patriots and then 1 with the Bucs? Who knows that maybe Peyton Manning has a few more, maybe Aaron Rodgers has a few more. But to your point, I mean, it's hard to go and get back and win. And I say this all the time too. And people are talking about, really only Patrick Mahomes, all he has to do is win like 3 or 4 more Super Bowls. And I'm like, I just sit there and I'm like, I can't. There's nothing I can say to impress upon them how difficult and how absurd it sounds to say that, first of all. Second, I'll sit here and say this, the likelihood that he goes back and wins 0 the rest of his career is exponentially higher than if he were to win 2 more. let alone 3 or
Right.
4. So like that's the mindset you have to think about, and we see it every year. Like, I mean, we talk about, I saw someone, oh, might as well just get the Bills and Chiefs in the Super Bowl this year because everyone wants it. Well, which one of them represented the AFC in the Super Bowl last year again?
Right.
Right. None
Yeah,
of them.
neither one.
So
Yeah. And you still have Joe Burrow playing in that conference. You got Lamar Jackson in that conference. Yeah, I mean, so it's not going to be that easy to just run this string of Super Bowl appearances. It never is. I mean, Brady had to go through whether it was Roethlisberger or Peyton Manning to get the Super Bowls. I mean, those weren't easy, but he got there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's why, and looking at our two guys and Brady and Rodgers, the NFC is weaker in terms of quarterbacks because I tweeted this out yesterday, and I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. The two best quarterbacks in the NFC this year, not career-wise or who I would still take in a big game, are Jalen Hurts and Geno Smith. Yeah. I think they've been the two best quarterbacks in the NFC. I mean, if you're picking the Pro Bowl today, there's two of your three quarterbacks. I don't know who the third one, but it might be Daniel Jones. He's had a pretty good year. Two, or Kirk Cousins is, 6-1.
Cousins, well.
Yeah.
Let's wait until we get some more primetime games in there. Come on.
What time is there's no Pro Bowl this year, right?
No, right.
They're not playing a game, so maybe Kirk will make the Pro Bowl final. I think he has made the Pro Bowl because he's always an alternate. Because obviously Brady and Rodgers never go to the game. They're either Brady normally playing in a Super
2005.
Bowl. Right? Yeah, he's in a Super Bowl, and Rodgers by then is like, I'm not going to that game.
Yeah, and it's like, look, I mean, first of all, real quick, remember that question I asked like 3 weeks ago, who the best team in the NFC West was? Well, I mean,
yeah.
It's looking better and better. And look, we'll talk about San Francisco too, because I think you kind of saw the full impact, obviously the full impact of what a guy like healthy Christian McCaffrey can have. Not so much the one where he showed up in 48 hours, he was on the field, even though, again, he led the team in touches and was very impactful in that game against Kansas City. We saw a whole different side to him. But to my original point, what I was trying to make was Seattle. I mean, Geno Smith, I mean, I kind of half jokingly said, hey, are they the best team in the NFC West? I mean, they're making a case to be the best team in the NFC right now. I'm obviously still giving that edge to the Eagles because they haven't lost, and there's no reason to doubt them at this point. But I mean, Seattle's just going out there and producing, and Geno Smith is just playing like a top 10 pick that he was just 10 years later. You know what I mean? It's wild to think that if someone would have told me this before the season, I would say, get out of here. That's what I'm waiting for. Get out of here. Get out of here. I don't want to hear that.
It's Halloween. It's Bizarro World. Tom Brady's 3-5. Aaron Rodgers is 3-5. LeBron James is 1-5, and Kevin Durant's 1-5.
Yeah.
Like 4 all-time greats. The greatest football player ever, in my opinion, the greatest basketball player ever, and Durant and Rodgers are, I think, are very comparable to each other in pecking order of their respective sports. I mean, these guys aren't finding ways to win. Meanwhile, the Philadelphia Eagles are undefeated. And like you said, Seattle's 5-3, and the Atlanta Falcons lead the NFC South at 4-4. So it's a strange season.
And that was a wild game too. I picked the Falcons to win that game because I thought that they'd been strangely they've been in a lot of games. They just didn't really have enough to pull it off. Pull some of these victories off. Obviously, everyone was about the Grady Jarrett play from a few weeks ago against the Bucs, and obviously, I think the Bucs are very fortunate that they were able to hold on to that game. But from a Carolina standpoint, I mean, you're about to like bust through and go 2-0 post Christian McCaffrey, post selling the farm, and you get perhaps the best pass of the season. The PJ Walker. What I think they said the next gen stat number on that, I think, was that it traveled 67 yards, something in the air, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful throw. I mean, you're not going to get any better than that this season. And it's kind of, again, I mean, every quarterback in this league can make a throw like that eventually. It's just a matter of how consistent you can do it. But that was just a beautiful play. Unfortunately for them, the celebration put them out of field goal, or ultimately put them out of field goal range because they missed it and ultimately lost that game. And those are those little mistakes that come back and bite teams that aren't quite good yet. But it's a weird dynamic down in Carolina, because based on how they were acting a couple weeks ago, it looked like they were about to just sell off the farm. Now you're sitting here thinking, well, maybe they have some. They can still compete because right now, technically, they're still second in the division in the NFC South.
Yeah, the way the South is right now, I believe Atlanta's 4-4, New Orleans and Tampa 3-5, and now Carolina 2-6. If Carolina had won that game, you would have had a 4-way tie at 3-5. Like, I don't even want to figure. I think Carolina would have been in first place if they won that game yesterday.
Well, Atlanta's in first place right now.
They are 4-4, yeah. But if you flip it and they're all 3-5, who the hell knows who's in first place? Meanwhile, Washington is 4-4. The Patriots are 4-4, and they're in last place in their respective divisions because both Eastern divisions in the AFC and the NFC are like powerhouse divisions this year, which is the league is just all upside down. Like even I'm looking at Buffalo, and to me they look like the best team. But for the final quarter and a half last night, like you said, it looked like they got bored. Well, did Kansas City also get bored in the AFC Championship game last year, and then by the way, lost in overtime? Like, you can't do that.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of those things that the Bills will have to learn as the season goes. Like, I think there's we've seen teams that are good half. I mean, look at the Packers. I hate to keep piling on them, but they're
they are. They're brilliant. It's great half. Yeah,
and I don't consider that them getting bored. You know what I mean? I think that's just flaws in their team. Whereas I think Buffalo is just they go out when they win, they blow teams out. I mean, their average margin of victory in their 6-game home winning streak is like 20 some odd points. So like to me, I just like I'm not terribly concerned. Like, I mean, again, I was noticing, Kansas City fans were rejoicing there at the end, watching Josh Allen throw a couple picks, forgetting that, their guy tends to throw some bad interceptions as well. But that's beside the point. I just look at them and I was like, they got bored. Doesn't mean that can't come back and bite them, in the rear end when it comes time to the playoffs. But I'm not I'm not terribly concerned. 27-17. I mean, that game was a much bigger difference than the score actually indicated. So, to me, I think Buffalo would be fine. I'm not too concerned with that. I've seen enough evolution, so to speak, from them over the last couple of years to think that I believe they're not going to let that get to them when the games really matter. So,
what happens if they get Alvin Kamara? Because that's the rumor now that they're all in on Alvin Kamara. That'd be a great addition.
No, it would. And look, I mean, I mentioned it earlier in the show. I mean, they run the ball well. A lot of that has to do with Josh Allen and the threat of Josh Allen running, because he's just a different, he's just a different beast when it comes to running the football as a quarterback. You had a guy like Alvin Kamara, that's different. However, I don't know how eager the Saints are right now to want to do that, because I mean, look, they're coming off a 24-0 win. They're looking at this saying like, hey, we're right in the mix here. And I know last week's game for Andy Dalton, we kind of poked fun at the whole timing of Kirk Herbstreit's poetic discussion on Andy Dalton right before he threw 3 interceptions. But he's been fairly good for the Saints, and he's protected the ball for the most part, except for that one game. And all of a sudden, to your point, they're right in the mix of things. And regardless of how the Bucs end up playing at the end of the season, I'm never guaranteeing a Saints victory, because they always play them hard. So, maybe the Saints will sit here and say, you know what? Maybe we don't have to get rid of Kamara. Maybe we can compete this season and not consider this a lost season. So I don't know if that's necessarily going to be an option for Buffalo, but if it did turn out that way, then yeah, I mean again, we know Buffalo's going out to win a Super Bowl. Those are the type of moves that you make to go win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, exactly. We saw obviously San Francisco do it. We've seen Kansas City do it. Buffalo, I think, will make a move at the trade deadline. But how many teams in the NFC are really out of it? I would say Detroit, obviously, and maybe Chicago, but they're 3-5, and I think Justin Fields is getting better every week. I mean, if you're 4-4 or better, you're in it. Or if you're in the NFC South, you're in it no matter what your record is. Maybe Carolina at this point because of the loss.
Yeah, they're 2-6. Straight record, yes, but the reality of it is, Chicago is kind of in it, quote unquote, but do I really think they're in it?
Right.
No.
And
same with like Carolina. Like I think Carolina's more or less going to play. Like I didn't think all of a sudden they got better after trading Christian McCaffrey. No, I mean, to be honest, I think they're better with PJ Walker than any other quarterback they've had in there. So that could be a silver lining for them. But even then, I don't think that they're going to be good enough to make a run. Maybe play spoiler here and there. But so, technically, yeah, they're still in it, but I don't necessarily believe that that's the case. So let me ask you something. And real quick, I talked about it before the season, and we're seeing this, and there was there was a stat that they put up on the sheet about Aaron Rodgers' start in terms of lowest number of touchdowns, lowest number of yards, yada yada yada, and I'm thinking to myself, that's the Davante Adams effect. And I said this before, how do you replace 29 touchdowns and 3,000 yards? Well, they haven't been able to, and it's been very apparent, and I think one of the reasons why this offense has struggled. So, and I'm sure Davante Adams, considering how yesterday went, in my fantasy team, he got me 0.7 points. It was not good.
He had one catch for 3 yards, right?
Yeah. So maybe he's having a little buyer's remorse. Maybe he's having a little regret getting out of Green Bay. Maybe he's not. I mean, he is in Las Vegas, so who knows? But the point is, I think the state of the wide receiver position right now is perhaps as good as it has been in a very long time. And I say that to say this: where do you rank AJ Brown in the grand scheme of things? Because like I asked yesterday, I was like, is he the best receiver in football? And you think of names like Davante Adams and Cooper Kupp and Tyreek Hill, Tyreek Hill is on pace to break Calvin Johnson's record now, again, with an extra game, whatever. I mean, I'm not going to harp on that, but 2,000 yards is 2,000 yards. So who is the best wide receiver in football? And I it's getting harder and harder not to say AJ Brown, because you look at his impact on what he's brought to Philadelphia and that extra element to that offense that was clearly not there last year. But just his ability, and I hate to bring up this particular person, but he reminds me a lot about Antonio Brown. In terms of he feels like he has very low center of gravity when he runs. And not only can he be a devastating deep threat, but he can navigate the field just like any other route specialist. You know what I mean? Like, that's just the impression that I get watching him play. And, he goes up and makes these catches that seem like they should be, impossible, easy. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, is he the best wide receiver in football? And I'm close, John. I think so, because again, the body of work, just everything that he does across the field, part of it's the dip in production, obviously, from Davante Adams going to Las Vegas. Cooper Kupp is a little bit banged up, and that team's struggling. Like I said, I've already mentioned Tyreek Hill. You can throw in who am I missing here? Completely blank.
Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson are both
even
outstanding.
Jamar Chase, though, John. Jamar Chase seems, and I don't mean this as an insult, but maybe not necessarily, but not a one-trick pony, but you know what I mean? Like, he does one thing very, very well, and he's very dominant at that. I think AJ Brown does more. Can do what Jamar Chase does in terms of, obviously we saw it yesterday, catching the deep ball and creating mismatches in that sense. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
I think what happens is when you look at the receivers, you also have to weigh in who's throwing them the football.
Oh, sure.
And also who their running mate is. So, like, in a sense, AJ Brown, it's fortunate that he has Devontae Smith as his running mate. Also, Dallas Goedert is one of the best tight ends in football. And now you got Jalen Hurts, who's playing at a very high level. The offensive line is outstanding. So he's got all that working with him. But you'd also could look at it and say, well, maybe he's not going to get as many catches because you got to keep everybody happy. You got to get Devontae Smith the ball. You got to get Dallas Goedert the ball. But yesterday, he was by far the best player on the field. He was just running pristine routes. He's so strong. I know the comparison to Antonio Brown, except he's about 30 pounds heavier.
Yeah,
that's great frame too, right?
That's the big difference.
He's a monster. Yeah, he's a monster. He's right there. Yeah, look at how deep that position is now in the NFL. Mm-hmm. Like, if you were to rank your top 10 wide receivers, does Mike Evans make it? Probably not anymore. When you're talking about all these young guys, and like, we didn't even mention DeAndre Hopkins, who's a freak. Like, he's a phenomenal player. So yeah, this is the deepest it's been, and certainly AJ Brown is right in the conversation. Give Philadelphia credit. They saw a position of need. They went and got a guy signed him to a long-term deal and gave up that first-round pick. And Tennessee at least did a smart thing is they used that first-round pick on a wide receiver. Green Bay used the first-round pick they got for Davante Adams on a front seven guy. Like, it's just almost like if you're going to trade maybe the best receiver in football, wouldn't you use that draft pick on another wide receiver?
Yeah.
Like, Minnesota did that, right? We didn't even mention Stephon Diggs. There's another guy.
Yeah.
Stephon Diggs, they trade. That's another great receiver.
That's the name that I knew I was drawing a blank on someone very obvious, and that's what it was. And it's like
player.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And it's like it's I think it's great because obviously, I mean, look, the passing game certainly over the last 5, 6, 7 years has really exploded. I mean, we've seen offensive numbers kind of,
Yeah.
I mean, it's the evolution that we've seen over the last 15, 20 years with rules that start to favor more so the offense and the defense, and making things a little bit easier to create offense in this league. I mean, 15, 20 years ago, a lot of these rub routes and pick play type situations wouldn't have been as successful in the NFL because, well, you run across the middle of the field, you're going to get your head knocked off. And that was just
right.
That was the nature of the game. So, now it's like you don't need to put size in the middle. You can put speed in the middle and still be greatly effective. And that's where we're seeing some of these guys flourish, like Antonio Brown and some of these, going back 10 years, obviously. And I hate to bring them up, but to me, it just seems like a very appropriate comparison to a guy like AJ Brown, who kind of does a lot of the same things across the field. So, yeah, I mean, it might be something interesting. Maybe we'll come back later this week and we'll give our top 5 receivers, because that's something I don't even know if I can do it off the top of my head. Yeah, it really is a tough one.
Yeah.
It's really a tough one in terms of who you're going to leave off the list. Are you going to put more weight in? Because I don't think overnight Davante Adams. I think it's obviously a situational reason why his play or his numbers have declined, obviously. But again, I don't know. That'd be a tough list to put together, because we've already mentioned about 6, 7, 8 guys that could easily fall into the quote unquote top 5 mentioned list, and again, we're not even talking about Cooper Kupp, who won the Triple Crown last year. You know what I mean?
Or Deebo Samuel. Deebo
Samuel, yeah, exactly.
Maybe the most unique of all wide receivers, because you can use him as a running back and he's a blocker. And it's just a slew of guys that are so talented. But again, it comes because the college game is wide open now, right? So now, before that, it wasn't that way. Nebraska was running the wishbone or whatever the hell they were running in the 90s. So,
well, and that's obviously that because as we know, the rules are far more aligned with what the college game is now as opposed to what it was before, where it's like, you come out of college and you'd have to adjust to a pro offense. Well, the pro offense and the college offense are very similar. I mean, there's really not too much different, for the most part. I mean, obviously each team is going to have its own unique twist to everything, but for the most part, that's why you're seeing a lot of young quarterbacks come out and have success right away, but not necessarily maintain that success. So they do something very familiar. And just like the evolution in the NFL. In the NFL, you cannot just rely on pure talent and skill. You need to evolve and become a smarter football player. And not every quarterback in particular is capable of doing that. So, but it's a little bit easier for them to kind of hit the ground running and hopefully build off of that nowadays with how, not only the games are similar, but obviously I think impatience among front offices, coaches, fans kind of, push these players to start starting much sooner. So that's going to do it for us here today. We're going to say goodbye on Halloween. Hopefully everyone goes out and has fun trick-or-treating, dressing up, doing whatever. Like I mentioned last week, I miss, this is the time of the year that I miss UMass, John, because this time of year at UMass, I'd be doing much more than sitting on the couch watching horror films and drinking hot chocolate. So it was far more exciting. But although I do appreciate my situation now, because I, again, the idea of going out and doing that is fun. actually going out and expelling energy and doing all that stuff is it's not so much fun. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Be sure to follow us on Twitter. It's at FPC Radio Live. And of course, I'm at IGLEN31, and you can find John at JohnSapp25. So thank you everyone, and we will talk to you tomorrow as we recap. Well, real quick, John, who you got? Browns, Bengals?
I'll go with the Bengals.
Yeah.
Better quarterback. Go with younger brother Joe Burrow. And also, the NFL is so brilliant sometimes in their marketing. You got the Browns against the Bengals, two teams that like to wear orange in their uniforms for Halloween.
Oh, this is going to be great. It's going to be great. So thank you, everyone, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.